I'm Dylan Ratigan. I've interviewed nearly every CEO and most world leaders during the past 25 years. And now on Bootstrapping, I'm turning my attention to the new CEOs and the irrepressible entrepreneurs leading the next generation of innovation in the world. Welcome back to Tasty Live. I am Dylan Ratigan. Time for another episode of Bootstrapping. Today's guest, Sean Lesser, a man who has made it his mission to make men healthy, which is a controversial undertaking as to what is an unhealthy man and what are the tools. I mean, you talk about Sean jumping into a hornet's nest. I guess let's be clear about what your product is, because even what I just said is already sort of probably has people, spiraling 10 directions in terms of what it means to be a man or heal. What does that mean to you, and how have you turned that into a body of work?
Sure. So what it means to me is I went through a certain journey where I had a full mental breakdown. I was in some psych wards, right? And I was basically at a 10. A lot of people in their lives are at 2, 4, 6. So how do we help people not get where I was? And what activities?
And the symptoms of where you are is basically detached from reality, unresponsive to responsibility. I mean, what is that? I mean, when you describe being in a psych ward, you're talking about someone who's basically resigned from engaging sort of the constant counterparty expectations of everything from taxes to the credit card companies to work to family to et cetera. Basically, to no mas, right? And so what is the healing journey from that level of removal to be able to sort of help be at a healthy interaction? What is your thesis in terms of what that journey looks like?
Sure. So if you think about mental health, think of it almost like a pie chart, right? And I've seen some information from, for example, Tom Insel, who's well-renowned in the space. So 20% is therapy and different drugs, 10% is DNA, and 70% is community. Because I've had now conversations with about 300 people, and this topic is never 1 degree away from anyone. It's half a degree or 0 degrees from everyone. And a big part of my getting better was kind of realizing I'm not the only guy that's feeling like this, right?
And when you say feeling like this, you're describing a feeling of what it sounds like.
Depression, anxiety, right?
But your argument is that's derived from disconnection, a feeling of disconnection.
Yes, when I was in my state, basically I was handicapped. It was as if I almost became a baby and I went back to
But your thesis is that connection is the foundation of healthy men.
Connection, and then also conversation, right?
Connection through conversation and shared community is the foundation of healthy men, probably healthy women too, I would imagine, probably healthy people. But in your case, I guess your point is that it's less talked about, less available, less accepted, less understood with the male community.
Right. There's a lot of fear, anxiety about talking about these things. That leads to a lot of loneliness and isolation for guys. And women and guys are a little bit different. Guys meet shoulder to shoulder. Women meet face to face. They both have issues, obviously, right? But guys especially don't want to talk about these things. And the statistics are something around 40% of guys are in these situations with depression or anxiety or these feelings. They don't want to talk about it, right? I get it. I don't want to talk about it. But we're trying to help to change that. It's also helping to bring down the stigma, because you break your arm, you go to the hospital, you come back, people sign your cast. I broke my head, my brain, and you're hiding in the corner.
How do you enroll more? What is your goal? What is your current objective?
The objective is to get people involved in this movement, right? In general, to open up the conversation, to break down the stigma. And really, we also have an app, right? And we're a foundation, everything's for free. And the app, the purpose of that is around community, where guys can join. They can go to the website, thereal.care, and join. And it's a place where guys can talk about these things and not feel like they're being judged. Yeah. Also, it's a place where when I was in a bed, talk to other men, other peers.
Which other men? Other men in their town? Other men in another town? Other men?
It's global.
Other disconnected men?
We just started, but it's going to be men across the country and across the globe. So we have around 300 members right now, and it's growing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now put this in. So you obviously you're probably familiar a little bit with, like, I think it was Iron John was a book, was a man, sort of what it means to how to be a man, philosophical,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
or what's essential male health, whatever. You obviously have the celebrity of Andrew Tate. You have the celebrity of Jordan Peterson, who've made themselves huge celebrities talking about what it means to be a man.
Right.
Your product is less about the behavior. These people tend to focus on behavior. Oh, a man would do this, or a man would do this, or he would buy this, or he would go to this, it's all this externalism. And your point is, even the man who can buy all this and do all this and go all this and be all this, which you were,
Yes,
can still have a broken brain. And the brain is not a function of whether I can buy, hold, and do these things. The brain is a function of my sense of place and connection with other men on a day-to-day basis, which I don't have. And
yes,
I'm trying to create a place for that.
exactly. Because I ran an investment bank, right? And I worked on Wall Street, but that didn't.
Planes, trains, and automobiles for miles.
Right. So, but all those things, money's great and all those things, but it's really the most important thing is what you're thinking and your thoughts versus these objects that we think we have to get. They're nice, and I'm all for them and all for having a lot, but that's not what makes you full or happy, is having more and more stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think for sure anybody who's even had a little bit of stuff pretty quickly realizes stuff, after you've experienced the pleasure of having it, all becomes stuff, which then actually becomes, anyway, it's a different conversation. Why do you think you can be successful in the face of the amount of, again, the celebrity male movement is on behavior, external behavior, or I mean, Jordan Peterson, to his credit, really does try to speak to some thinking and decision making more than just a lifestyle. Anyway, what makes you think that you can be successful with this, especially considering the social shame for men opening a discussion about their sense of disconnection, even in the face of success?
Well, I think also right now in society, kind of the timing is right. And also I've been doing a lot of talks telling my story. And I think the people that I'm talking to look at me as kind of a peer. Like the people that I'm talking to, a lot of times it might have been clients that I had in my previous job.
You're saying you had social status before you admitted to your broken brain that gives you the sort of, you don't get socially ostracized the way a lower status person would by admitting your brain broke. In fact, you get attention.
I don't know if they get ostracized but they look at me and be like, that's the guy next door. I know Sean. Our kids played Little League baseball together. They can
familiarity, more familiarity than status. I got it.
Yeah. So they can see themselves in me. And lots of times when I'm telling my story, and people, when you this is a giant ocean within mental health or anxiety and depression, and you kind of touch the button, you just talk about it a little bit, the people just open up because they want to talk about it, but they don't feel comfortable to. That makes sense to you?
Absolutely. So what do you think is I've spent a decent, years ago when I left NBC, I went and worked at Camp Pendleton, where they had lots of young people, mostly men, transitioning out of the military because the war was winding down. And it was a transition into civilian life, which was famously mundane in comparison to what life had been in the Middle East. And especially most importantly, relative to male bonding. When you would ask most of those soldiers why they would go back for a second, third, or fourth time, it was because their buddy Sean was still there, and their buddy Matt was still there, and whoever, and they're like, I can't leave them there, and well, I'm here in Oceanside. I'm going back. It's not a political belief. It's not Muslim. It's not America. It's Sean.
Right.
And when they come home, they don't have that, I guess, is my point. Sorry to go on about this for a second.
No, go.
And I'm curious how. Here's the distinction that I make. When there's a crisis environment, bonding happens quickly and with intensity. When there's not a crisis environment, it does not. It makes sense that you had an experience when you had a crisis that you've come out and talked about. It makes sense for all of us that we have these different bonds in our lives from crisis periods good or bad, by the way. Crisis doesn't have to be a negative expression. It can be intensely positive. I got promoted to this job, this whole new work, moving, whatever these things are. And you're talking about having this conversation pre-crisis, basically. You're saying I want less crises because obviously that's a pretty stressful for everybody all the time. And so, but pre-crisis, no one wants to talk about.
I would look at it a little bit differently, in the sense that, yeah, I was in a crisis. I was at a 10, but everybody in their life, 10 being the worst, I need medical help. I need help now. Everyone in their life, every human goes through struggles. So at any point, they're at a 2, a 4, a 6. But we don't need them to get to where I was, right? And also in society,
in terms of, that's like a stress score that you're interpreting.
Yeah, being suicidal and not being in a good spot.
Total disengagement.
Yeah. Totally, like, I don't want to be here anymore. Right. So that's the far end of the spectrum. But there's things for people that are at that spot. But how do you avoid getting there? And also, like you were talking about, when guys come back from the military, or even me, I lost my identity when I wasn't part of my company anymore, because in the military, you leave, you go, who am I? What am I? Right. The same thing happens in business. Same thing happens to athletes. Same thing happens. And then, who are you? I'm my company. I'm the military. You become that thing, and you can't separate yourself. And then once that thing is gone, you're like, who am I? Right. And I'd also say, in society right now, of course, you have COVID effects, but people are less. In the old days, you had the bowling, or you were at your job for 30, 40 years, or whatever it is. You had these relationships, but where are those relationships now? Or you talk to your neighbors, but now you don't. So that's an important part for people to have those types of connections, to make them, honestly, that's what helped me become healthier.
And what has the initial feedback been from your users?
No, people are very excited. I think it's also interesting. We've had so many conversations, and so many times I've spoken to so many people, and they always say to me, Sean, I never told anyone this, but, right? It's the power of vulnerability, because then they feel free to talk about things that are in their life.
It would be, in other words, when your approach is, let me tell you about my life experience and what I think and what I believe, as your opener, and then listen, that's a very different discussion than, tell me your darkest secrets, I'm all ears.
Right. And a therapist is great, but it's different when you're, me and you, or maybe we had similar experiences, versus telling a doctor that you're paying money to. That's their job. That's fine. But that's just a different kind of relationship, right? You're going to listen more probably to a peer about something than maybe you're a little hesitant on what a doctor tells you.
Yeah. And so my final question, I guess, would be, what is your dream scenario? And take me the end of the real rainbow with Sean Lesser.
Sure. So I'm hoping that we have a community that spans across the country and across the globe. And also we can make some difference in the stigma, because like I was saying before, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, people come back, you sign your cast. You talk about mental health, and you feel like you have to hide in the corner and not talk about this anymore, like you're useless or something. So to change that whole, thought process in people's minds.
TheReal.com, is that correct?
.care.
.care, going all the way. I love
all in, man. Going all the way.
TheReal.care, nonprofit community for men like you and men like me to talk about things that you might just want to talk about.
Safe space.
This is Tasty Live. I'm Dylan Ratigan. You're watching Bootstrapping. This is a bootstrapper right here. This guy's a madman. And I like it. We're back on Tasty Live right after this.